Well, guys, take a look around because I found a pretty cool spot here up in the hills. So, just driving around looking for a place to record this talk, and what did I find? A park with caves. Caves in a park. It's pretty awesome. So, kind of give some street cred, to this whole meditation, self-development thing. If I'm like this dude with a beard talking from inside of a cave, graffiti kind of dilutes the effect of it. But what can you do? So here we are. So what I want to talk about is, and I just wrote about yesterday, is this idea of non-attachment. And non-attachment is something that we just hear that expression a lot in connection with things like Buddhism and yogic mysticism and Taoism. It's sort of this catchphrase of Eastern philosophy in general, non-attachment. And my experience with people who are sort of on this path, sort of self-admittedly, they those phrases work for them. They connect with that kind of language, and then they get involved in practices and reading, and they have sort of a community that they're part of, and they gradually sort of come to understand and eventually embody these things. But again, what I've noticed is that people who are not really on this kind of kick, something about the language or the presentation or something like that has turned them off at some point, and they haven't really sort of gone down that rabbit hole. And I think I understand why, because when you have daily struggles and you have all the normal turbulence of human emotions, and when you hear someone say, oh, well, you need to be non-attached, I think it can easily sound maybe condescending, maybe dismissive, maybe elitist. Like if someone else is above it all and they sort of present themselves that way, it seems impossible, it seems inaccessible, and it seems like, well, if you're above where I am, then you must be looking down at me while I'm sort of just going through the muck and the difficulty of daily life. And that's not really what non-attachment is. Non-attachment is really too important of a concept for it to be misunderstood and for people to sort of miss the opportunity to cultivate it. So that's quite a bit of what I focus on in these talks, is finding a new way to talk about these familiar concepts of either spiritual or personal development, and kind of deconstruct them, demystify them, and bring them to this level where it's not so vague and amorphous, and what does that really mean, and maybe I'll just sort of magically get there someday, but who knows how. And I want to convert it into something that is, again, practicable, actionable, relatable, and it's not lofty. It's really not. It's just about looking at something this way versus that way. And when you just position your mind, if you just shift your perspective or your mentality, then you're able to see it in a way where it makes sense, right? It's like you could take a picture of a lock or a keyhole from a certain angle, and you can't tell what it is anymore. You can't tell it, no, this is something that can be opened with a key. So if you miss that, if you look at these things in the wrong direction, you can't tell how to interface with it. It's not working for you, right? But this is too important to suffer that fate, okay? So when you think of non-attachment, I think people can picture something like a statue of Buddha, somebody who has his eyes half open and is sitting in lotus posture and meditating and sort of aloof to the concerns of the world, not fazed by anything. Or you might think of Yoda from the Star Wars movies, right? Or you might think of, I don't know. I mean, I thought of the example of some guy sitting on a beach playing a ukulele. Actually, I thought of my friend Wes Miller that I went to UCLA with. He's the kind of guy that you can just sort of picture hanging out on the beach with some friends, just playing ukulele and singing along, and just sort of without a care in the world, right? And a lot of us see people like that, and we kind of envy that sort of carefree, just sort of take things as they are, just roll with it kind of attitude. not fazed by the drama, not fazed by, office politics or the corporate rat race, you name it. So how do we get there, and how do we think about this the right way? As far as I can tell, there are two ways to cultivate non-attachment. So I'll just lay them out in succession, but this is not a step one, step two kind of thing. There are two ways that are equally a good place as any to start. And when you start with one, it automatically kind of opens you up to the other. And hopefully that will all make sense in just a moment. So the first way to become non-attached, which is to say, to let come what comes and to let go what goes without protest, right? The first way to do that is actually, it's sort of counterintuitive. It's actually by being very attached to results, very attached to what happens, and getting 100% in the driver's seat, taking as much initiative and accountability as you possibly can, being proactive, being very goal-oriented, being very motivated, being a person who takes action, right? So, being non-attached when you are failing out of school, or you feel very unhealthy and out of shape, or you're broke, or you're unsatisfied, non-attachment can sound like resignation. It can sound like not putting up a fight anymore, just accepting things the way they are and doing nothing about these things that make you unhappy. That doesn't really work, and I think people who can't hear this kind of talk, this sort of spiritual self-development talk, it's because it's been presented to them in a way where they equate acceptance and non-attachment with resignation and just giving up, and somehow trying to find peace in giving up and not trying. And what I'm saying is, try your damnedest, right? Just go get some good habits, figure out what it is you want, the things that you want to change, get very constructive and very action oriented about what is going to move the dial with respect to those issues. Go out and get a workout regimen and figure out the right food to be eating, and get in shape and feel better, and find a study partner, find a study group, schedule more time for that kind of work, and watch your grades get better, right? Or show up a little earlier and leave a little later at work, and watch that situation improve. Go to your manager and ask them to clarify, okay, what exactly do you and don't you need from me? Ask for more responsibility and deliver on that as quickly as possible. These are just a sort of a sampling of ways that you can get more self-initiating and more action-oriented, but you can watch TED Talks on YouTube. You can read more thought-provoking, sort of philosophical type of material, whether it's online or elsewhere. God forbid you should actually pick up a book. Try actually doing things like really cooking. Make eye contact with people. Be genuine. Be vulnerable. Laugh at yourself, right? Be less self-conscious. Listen to music in the car and really sing along with it with a little more oomph, a little more realness. Sort of come out of the shadows is what I'm saying, and try to live life a little more fully. And I would say sort of get into this game of sort of being a better person and improving and learning and growing and testing where you think your limits might be, and surprising yourself when you find that you're a lot less limited than you thought. You were just comfortable in your little box, in your little comfort zone. What I think is that the comfort zone is the coffin for the living, right? So we don't want to be living life that way. So that sounds almost like the exact opposite of non-attachment, because it sounds like make the maximum effort possible, get really invested in an outcome, and put yourself behind it 100%. This is how you come to a place of non-attachment, by doing that, which is not obvious, which is that, number one, I would say there's sort of three aspects to this. Number one is that when you discover how much power your personal agency, your initiative, and intelligent and organized action has in your life, the power that you really have to make changes, then what happens is you do take the bumps in the road in stride. Because number one, you are now aware of the fact that so many of these things that once seemed to be insurmountable obstacles are crumbling in the face of persistent and intelligent effort. So you're not as bothered by something because you see it as workable. You see it as a problem that can be solved, and that you are the person who can solve it, either by asking for help or using your own skills or continuing to develop yourself and then taking another crack at it later on when you feel stronger. But it's actionable now, and you are less fazed by disappointments and obstacles and things that you can't do today, but you recognize that you could do them later on down the line. And with the way you're going, it's only a matter of time, and it's probably less time than you might have thought before. So that's one way you become less attached. Another side point to that, this is still kind of the first point, is that you see bumps in the road as just that, as bumps in the road, not signs that you are going in the wrong direction or life is going in the wrong direction. The road is not paved well, but this is a road that you've chosen, and it's a road that is going exactly where you want to go. And sometimes there are just rough parts of that journey. Sometimes the road gets very steep, sometimes it gets very narrow, sometimes it gets very windy, but it's the direction itself that you've got confidence in, and that does remove quite a bit of reactivity or attachment to the current state of affairs. It puts things in the long view, right? So that's the first way. The second way is that when you really get into this stuff and you do apply yourself and you are putting your damnedest into it, it doesn't take very long to recognize that this is a lot of work. This is a lot to keep up with. And you might be opening up these new reservoirs of energy and enthusiasm and resolve within yourself. And that's giving you all this momentum and energy and enthusiasm. But what happens is you will run into the reality of your biological limitations eventually. You will be confronted with the fact that you are still a human, you're still a mammal, you're still a primate, and you need things like food and sleep, and you still sort of have these animal impulses, and you have an old reptile brain in there somewhere, and you just can't do it all. You just can't. And I give this example of no matter how noble my aspirations are in the morning when I'm all fired up and energized, eventually my blood sugar starts to drop and I need to eat. And I would give it about 20-30 minutes after I finish that burrito, and my to-do list has gone from like ending world hunger, ending ignorance and self-loathing, and filling everybody with love and enlightenment, and maybe even impeaching Donald Trump by noon today. My to-do list. After I've filled my stomach up with food, that to-do list has shrunk to like take a nap, look at cat gifs, repost some like Ozman crazy videos, like cat versus praying mantis videos, and maybe make some inappropriate jokes with my friend Eddie. That's what it shrunk down to. That humbles you, and that makes you non-attached to the whole area of personal growth, actually, which is really important. Self-forgiveness, self-acceptance, and patience and tolerance, empathy and compassion for yourself, which makes you pretty unattached to the pace of growth that is just not really sustainable. You learn to just take things in stride once again. You learn to make the most of it when you feel on, and you kind of just honor yourself and honor the reality of your human frailties when you're not feeling 100% and you can't go and make this stellar kind of Boy Scout type effort. That's the second part of non-attachment. So the first part is max out what you can, and you take things in stride because you realize you have quite a bit of power to win this game in the long run. The second part, just to summarize, the second part is when you realize you have limitations, you become unattached to the things that maybe a perfect person who never needed food or sleep or sex or anything like that could handle, but that's not you and that's not reality. And so you just kind of lighten up about it. And then you've become unattached in two ways. The third way that you become unattached is, I would say, this comes from just sort of observing life and observing that there are cycles, and observing this is totally outside of you now, but you just become a student of nature. This is why I love the book The Tao Te Ching, because it's one of the most philosophically mature meditations on what is the way of life. The Tao means the way. Like, what is the way of this world? And the way of this world is that everything is a play of opposites. The nature of existence is duality, light and dark, long and short, heavy and light. And what that means is that nothing is going to purge this world of sadness, of heartbreak, of disappointment, of senseless acts of sort of wastefulness and fear. Nothing is going to remove those things, because the light, if you want to think of it that way, automatically produces a shadow. All you have to have is something. When you place something in the light, what happens? The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. Anyone can observe this, right? When the daytime is, when it's overcast and sunlight is very faint and diffused, look at your shadow. Your shadow is also kind of blurry and it's not that dark. But if you stand under something as harsh as like a stage light or very bright light, then that shadow is very dark and very opaque and sort of impenetrably dark, right? So the good and the bad are they're just there, and they coexist all the time. And you can never really get rid of 100% of the bad stuff unless you want to live in an empty world, and you don't. Nobody really does. So it's just the idea that it can't be summertime forever. Things happen in alternation, things happen in seasons and in cycles, and everything comes to an end and endures a period of, I would say, latency or dormancy, and then it starts to sort of spring up again and then unfold, and then it's sort of in full bloom, and then what happens? It starts to deteriorate again, and then you're back to dormant or latent or a sort of plateau, however you want to think about it. But this happens all the time. This is just the way of nature. And just to get kind of serious for a second, we're all living beings that were born, and at some point all of that will come to an end. At some point your life will be over, and the meaning of your life cannot depend on there being a legacy after you die. It can't depend on you meeting this list of things that you needed to accomplish. It can't depend on having, falling in love and being with the same person for your entire life. It can't depend on reaching the top of your company. It can't depend on making a name for yourself. It can't depend on having this many kids and having this much money left in retirement. It can't depend on your kids all went to great schools and are in happy relationships and in great shape. It can't depend on anything like that, because at some point it's just going to be over, and the chips have fallen where they've fallen at that point. Living, having a life to live, that has to be its own reward. That has to have its own inherent and intrinsic and tremendous meaning, no matter how things do or don't work out for you. Because when you hang your happiness on these expectations of results, then number one, the sheer volume of things that are outside of your control, that will eternally be outside of your control, they have the power to strip your happiness from you then, if they don't work out the way they do. Or if your own human frailties have stopped you from sort of finishing first place in the race, then again, that can make you feel unaccomplished. But the point is, you have this life to live, and there isn't really a scoreboard anywhere. That scoreboard is only a tool that you come up with to motivate yourself to go after the things that you want to go after. But it's not ultimate. It's not being held over your head by some kind of sort of vindictive and judgmental biblical deity, right? That is not life. Life is just about figuring out who it is that you want to be. Who do you want to see when you look in the mirror? And knowing that you can be that 100%, no matter what it looks like on paper, no matter what the bank statement has to say, and not even what other people would say about you. The idea that there is an inner sanctum within you that is unknowable, untouchable, and only you can enter there. Not to expect other people to understand, not to expect the world to reward you for who you really are, but to be yourself and to find real joy in just having a self and a life in this world and just living it. And you really will care less and less and less and less about the ups and downs of life and these sort of choppy waves that are going on all around you. And then you're in a good shape. Then you're in a good place. Because you sort of own your peace at that point, because you realize that at any moment anything could be taken away from you. And on some level, tragedy and sort of letting yourself down, disappointing yourself, having things not work out the way they need to, they are harsh experiences, but they are also very skillful teachers. There's a saying that's attributed to Buddha. He never wrote anything down, so we sort of have to frame it with a bit of humility and say we're pretty sure that he said that pain is the currency of transformation. Spend it wisely. So there are many experiences in life that nobody would voluntarily sign up for, but they teach you that things are impermanent. They teach you that you are not perfect, that you are not perfectible, but somehow none of that negates the beauty and really the joy of life and living, and it really shouldn't. So those are my thoughts for you guys today. So please leave me some comments, respond in the comment section below. Just consider this the first part of a conversation, and really look forward to hearing from you guys and how this applies to your life, if this made sense. That's the most important thing, that this is clear and sensible. All right, and all right, guys. My name is Jasvinder, and we will talk again soon. Thanks for your time.